Welcome to the hood. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my hood, the whiskey hood, the spirit hood, where we talk about everything we can sip on. Happy Friday. I'm Jack Bigadoo, also known on the whiskey street as the hood sommelier. And it's been a minute. When it's cold outside, most of us are inside, so we get a chance to learn more about whiskeys and things that maybe we can actually go pick up on a shelf or try or get to. But if you can hear me, I would love to hear in a comment. If you can hear me, sound is good. I'm a little rusty. I haven't done this in a month or so. So, what do we do here? Here we learn, we share, we partake, and we try to get behind the history of why is it that we need to support a brand. A lot of brands never get the chance to tell their story, and to get a chance to hear it directly from an owner or from the brand ambassador or really the people behind it. It tells you where your dollar should go. Who are you supporting? And I always like to know, who am I supporting? It's easy for us to actually find a bottle and go Google it and maybe see the price and whatnot. But sometimes when you know the history, you understand why the price point is what it is. Why is it that the design is what it is? And you know exactly whose pocket you put in your money in. If there's one thing I don't play about, is my money. So I don't want to play about yours either. So today I decided to do what we do, but I didn't travel far today. I just went down the street. And in the Midwest, when we say down the street, I mean 5 hours away. That's how far I went. I'm in Nebraska. We are traveling to Minnesota. Today is actually very serendipity or serendipitous because today officially the TTB said American Single Malt have its rules and regulation, and this distillery also is changing a little bit of the conversation about American Single Malt. You may have not heard about them, but they call themselves Brother Justus, and I'm waiting, just like you. I'm waiting to hear what is that about. I did my googling, but today I want to hear the story. But I brought the man, the myth, the legend, the man in charge himself, Mr. Phil Steger. I hope I said it right, Phil Steger, to come here to the hood to come tell us everything we need to know about Brother Justus. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jack. It's my honor, man. I appreciate you, and especially with you just being down the street.
Just down the street. That's the best way to describe.
I mean, that's a day trip. That's a day trip, afternoon drive.
That is the only way to do it is to do it day trip style and literally go around and let the people know what's happening. If you're in Minnesota and you never heard about this brand or you didn't pick up this bottle, shame on you. Shame on you. You're not doing your job. You have to have, I tell people, every local person, Minnesota is a big state, and every single person should support their local, at least their local distillery. Stop by, grab one bottle, even if you don't like it. At least you bought it, so you can talk crap about it.
The rest
But at
assured,
least
you're
you
gonna
bought a
like
bottle,
it.
right? So the goal here is to make sure that we understand that whiskey not only is for everybody, but is everywhere. And whiskey doesn't have to be in one bucket. So Phil, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you being here.
It's my pleasure.
Tell us who you are. Who are you, Phil? Tell us a little bit about yourself, because one of the greatest thing we know in whiskey is people from all walks of life come in the whiskey industry. So I want to know a little bit about you. Who is Phil Steger?
Well, Jack, I appreciate it. I'm the founder and the CEO of Brother Justus Whiskey Company. I came to whiskey. I don't come from a whiskey distilling family. I don't come from a trust fund. I don't come from a hedge fund. The job that I was doing beforehand was I was actually doing manuscript preservation. I was working in Syria, Lebanon, Ukraine, taking digital images of ancient manuscripts before they were destroyed in war. And we were finishing that mission. And I'm not a scholar. I was tactics and diplomacy. And I was thinking, what can I do that has the kind of depth and richness and connection to land in history that a 1,000-year-old manuscript has? And I looked around and tried to think of anything in our modern culture that has that kind of connection. And the only thing that I could find was whiskey. The way that it takes simple ingredients to tell a huge story of land, of history, of passion, of legend, of myth, right? Everything. To me, there's nothing like it. And so that's what I got into. I wanted to do that, and I thought that Minesota would be the perfect place, which is my home state, to tell a story that American whiskey hasn't told before.
That is quite interesting. That is very interesting. So I'm assuming your background is history.
Yeah, I was actually a theology major who then became an activist and a humanitarian. I did humanitarian aid into Iraq before the war. I worked with local communities on economic and racial justice and equity. And my wife is in similar line of work. And one of us had to start to figure out how we were going to make some, you said it, you play with a lot, but you don't play with your money. One thing you don't play with is your money. At some point, I learned that lesson, and I thought, hey, I want to build something that can be enduring and last for myself and for my family. And so that's how I transitioned from these other work that I did. Along the way, I actually did get a law degree and worked as an asylum, attorney, as well as a regulatory attorney on energy and environmental. How do we get to a zero carbon world? But the passion, the thing that grabbed me like nothing else has ever grabbed me and wouldn't let me go, has been whiskey. And I didn't see it coming, but I've devoted the last 10 years to thinking about and working on and developing nothing else.
Which is, for me, is such a great story, because most people are quick to actually say how, you think of it, right? People love whiskey as a spirit, but there's few people that can go into the history itself of whiskey and tell you what brought them in, right? So if you're here, if you're watching, we're getting a few people coming on. Make sure you actually share this and put in the comments, say hello. Let's have a conversation as we go through this thing. So you come from this rich background. You realize whiskey have this great background.
Mm-hmm.
How is the brand Brother Justus comes into play?
Yep. Well, I'll tell you, there's two really important things about our brand and what makes us special. Number one is Minesota is never going to be a bourbon state, right? That's locked up. But what makes Minesota special as a state is also what makes it perfect for single malt or for barley-based whiskey. Minesota is the only place where the Great Plains, the eastern hardwood forest, and the boreal forest meet. And they're the only place where the Mississippi River starts. And so for me, and that manuscript idea was water from the Mississippi, grain from the Great Plains, oak from the hardwood forest, and peat from the boreal forest. And so immediately I thought Minesota is going to be a place where I want to help shape a new foundation for American whiskey, not to replace, right? It's not going to replace bourbon. It's not going to replace rye. But for as rich as American whiskey history is, we haven't played with two ingredients that have been there at the beginning, the earliest eras of whiskey making in the world, and that's barley and peat. And so Minesota is the ideal place to take the oldest whiskey ingredients and bring them together and forward into an American context, American techniques for American palates. And so that's the land of Minesota. But Minnesota also has this incredibly interesting and different whiskey history. 100 years ago, we had 1,200 whiskey distilleries in our state. 1,200 whiskey makers in Minnesota in the 1920s. They were all felonious, right? They were all moonshiners, but they were making the only trademarked or industry trade named whiskey in America. It was called Minesota 13. And it was recognized as having the highest standards, even though it wasn't like one main maker. It was 1,300 makers, but they were all to the highest possible standards. And at the heart of that story, how they learned it, that 1,300 learned it, or 1,200 learned it, they learned it from somebody that learned it from somebody that learned it from somebody. And the person who taught them was a Benedictine monk who was a blacksmith and a distiller. And his name was Brother Justus.
Wow.
William Treadle, but when he became a monk, took the name Brother Justus. And so the inspiration of the land, right, that we have these unique, perfect resources for making great single malt here, and then inspiration from our real history of an outlaw monk who was making whiskey and teaching people. He actually built whiskey stills and gave them to local farmers out of copper that he could get as a monk that they couldn't get as poor farmers. And then taught them one by one 500 years of monastic Benedictine distillation tradition and technique. And his only conditions was that they do what he taught them to the best of their ability, and then they teach what he taught them to their neighbor.
To others.
And that's how you get to 1,200. And so that inspiration, that's an American story. I think that's the kind of outlaw, that's the kind of, rebel that I think we need. Somebody that is willing to follow their passion and do the right thing, even if it breaks the rules.
Wow, dude. That's like a history lesson on its own. And I don't think a lot of people even know this history.
Yeah,
at all.
It was hidden. I mean, nobody talked about it because they didn't survive Prohibition when the huge distilleries that came out of Prohibition got their monopoly over supply and distribution of whiskey during the Prohibition. They tried to make sure that new small distilleries, independent distilleries, couldn't make it. And so Minnesota distilling stayed underground. It stayed outlaw. It's still happening, actually, as a matter of fact. There's moonshining happening in this state, maybe this night. It might be a little bit cold out there, but it still happens in this state, but it stayed underground because it never popped up. But that's something I think a lot of people, when I bring that story and let people know, it just feels like, that's cool. And I take a lot of inspiration from it. I actually went to the college that was operated by those Benedictine monks. I know people who knew them. I met Brother Justus's nephew, who was 90 years old, and we chopped it up on his 90th birthday. I brought Brother Justus up, and he knew I was naming the distillery after his uncle, and got his blessing and the blessing of his children. So, yeah, there's a lot of depth and a lot of passion in this.
So you know the history now. We know the inspiration. We know this history nerd is behind the brand. So now, how do you make the whiskey? Did you respect the way Brother Justus wanted whiskey to be made, or are you bringing something new to it? Let's talk about what I would like to call probably your standard expression, right? This will be kind of your standard expression.
That's our cold peated. Yeah, that's the one that we make that nobody else in the world makes.
Correct. So that's or you tell me. I want to hear exactly how he came about. So let's start with I have the Founder's Reserve in front of me as well. So
the way I approached whiskey was definitely from a perspective a place of profound respect for tradition, right? If you kind of the thread through this story is it is a little part of my own history that I actually lived in a monastery and lived as a monk for a short time. And I loved the way that lineage was carried on, that you can follow 1,000 years of history through that and actually be connected to something deeper and bigger. And so I'm very, very interested in and hugely respectful of two whiskey traditions. One is the Irish and then eventually became the Scottish tradition, which is using 100% malted barley, using peat, and making the mash and then the specific distillation, the specific high proof cuts, right? So when you're making your cuts off the still, you're not just taking a cleaver and just kind of hacking through, and you got your hearts and then you got some heads and you got little tails, you put it in a barrel and eventually the barrel makes it taste good. No, you're coming through and you're making precise chef's knife cuts to get esters, fruit, herb, spice, nut, right? Floral notes, as well as beautiful creamy acids, fatty acids in with the hearts. And then putting all of that, like a chef does, pulling from the pantry, the freezer, the fridge, putting all of that into a barrel and then letting those flavors marinate and steep and develop. So that to me, using barley water and peat and oak, that's the Scottish tradition. Now, the American tradition that I also deeply respect, the one contribution that American whiskey made was, not only moving from all barley to corn and rye, but the charred barrel, right? The charred barrel is what America brought to the world whiskey table. It didn't happen before distillers started making whiskey here, and now that flavor has taken over the world. And so my very simple inspiration was, what if we took the ingredients of Scotch, barley and peat, and the attention to fermentation and the building up of flavors through the fermenting of the distiller's beer, and then the very precise, high proof, clean cuts of those flavors out of the distillate, and then put those and do that in an intentional way so that it is matching the flavors of a new charred American white oak barrel. So that's how I approached my whiskey. And then from an ingredient standpoint,
you went full nerd on your whiskey.
I've seen your stuff. I know that your people and your listeners and your followers, they get it.
I can appreciate this because truly, not a lot of people can tell you why it's that they do the whiskey this way. They're just following the style. But it's almost like if somebody came to you and say, Phil, what is your biggest, your best dream as a whiskey lover? If you had to make it that way, what would it be? You're like, hold my beer. Let me tell you exactly how I make it. So that's how I see it. And I can feel the passion coming through. Or you saying it because somebody asked me one time, he's like, oh, you talk to all these brands and you do all these things and you own all this whiskey. But if you had to make your whiskey, what will it be? Yes. And you sound like me if I had to do it.
You get it, man. That means so much to me, Jack, that you say that, because that's actually internally in my own mind when I started on this journey exactly what happened. Because I was drinking Scotch and I was drinking Irish whiskey and I was loving the complexity and the depth and the incredible, I think in musical terms, balance of bass notes, treble notes, the chord structure, the length of the music, right? All of that. But there was something missing in terms of the wildness, the brashness, the boldness.
Like the French people would say, there was a certain je ne sais quoi that was missing.
Je ne sais quoi, that's right, sommelier. And then on the American side, I love that barrel, but and I love bourbon. I mean, my gateway was, the thing that really got me passionate was going to a bourbon distillery, and there's a specific brand that I was really into that made me think about this and see it. But for me, the corn and the rye have such a narrow window of flavor possibilities that and there's variation with it. I'm not saying it's one note by any stretch, but there's a frequency, right? There's a flavor frequency that it can only oscillate between. And it can't bring me outside of that, either to the left, to the right, to above or below. that barley can. Like barley, like no other grain, can take you anywhere you want to go. And so I kept finding these dissatisfaction. It's like, well, what if I could get this over here? Like, what if I could take the chocolate and the peanut butter and put them into a cup?
I know exactly where your mind is right now. That's what keep that smile, that smug on my face, because it's like it is the ultimate. Excuse my French, but the ultimate wet dream for a whiskey lover. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. Tell me how you want it. Tell me how you create it. Tell me how it's be. And that doesn't happen often because a lot of people just don't want to offend people's palate. They're like, oh, people like it this way, or people like it this way. So as we're talking about this, I'm thirsty. I can already imagine you getting me in. So I think before I walk in the peat, because I'm a peat lover myself, I think I'm gonna go with the Founders Reserve. It has all the things I need now. This is I'm gonna show you guys so you guys can see what the Founder Reserve looks like. I have a slight corner of it, but this is what it looks like. But I will show you on the right here. No, I don't have this one.
You did. You had your first photo.
First one. Yeah.
There it is.
So
you got it.
Is the Founders Reserve. It's 58.5% ABV, 117 proof. American Single Malt. This is called the Founders Reserve. The bottle says the barrels I selected for our first ever Founders Reserve express my founding desire to make a single malt whiskey that contained Minesota grand landscape in a glass. You know, you don't make that thing up. This is as personal as it gets.
Yeah, it is. Ooh, I love that sound.
So as we are pouring this, tell me about the Founders Reserve. How was it made? What barrels were selected? Average age, and maybe if there was a blending technique. There is a certain mesmerizing dark cacao, and I'm not talking chocolate, cacao. There's this lingering smell of cacao that passed through the front of the bottle when you open it immediately. If you're somebody who loves that 70% a low bitter cacao, you know what it smells like when somebody opens. You hear the ruffling, you can smell it from far away. So I'm gonna get into it. The proof looks right, is right there where it needs to be. I always bring out my whiskey water because I like to break down the whiskey so we know exactly what we have as far as taste is concerned. Let me see if I have my water here. It happens sometimes that I don't have it, so I'm just like you. I'm a nerd. I got my water with me. I have to make sure I taste it right. So if you've ever had brother Justus, put an F in the chat. Let us know if you ever tried it, if you had it, if you ever even had any whiskey from Kentucky. That's from Minesota. That's probably the real question, because I don't think a lot of people have had whiskeys from Minesota before. So
there haven't been a lot. So
let's hear about this product. What do we have?
It's 3 ingredients. It's 100% malted barley. It's 2-row barley, pale ale malt. It's fermented for 7 days, and then we're doing a combination of single pass hearts and then second pass distillation of heads and tails, where I'm getting to concentrate these really beautiful fruit and cacao esters, as well as that little bit of that cocoa butter from the fatty acid of the barley itself. It's then aged in new charred American white oak cask. All of the casks are made in Minesota. So Minesota, the malted barley is from Minesota. The water is the Mississippi headwaters, which is limestone rich. The Mississippi, between its origin in Minneapolis, runs over 642 miles of limestone. It's the only limestone bedrock of the Mississippi River. That's where we're taking our water from. And then the barley is Western Great Plains, or kind of high mountain Great Plains grown, but malted in Minnesota. And then the barrels are Minesota grown white oak, which are really intense with tannin and vanillin and sugar because of the very short growing season and the adaptations to the deep cold. So
I
that's how
don't
we're
know
making it.
what is going on here. Oh, Ari, you got friends that came down. Ari say great brand.
Thank you, Ari. I appreciate that. I would love to
The-
hear. I mean, I would love to. That's to me, it's the ingredients and then the craft of the fermentation. So I can talk about the blend and everything else, but I want to hear what you think about the flavors, and then we can unpack it. Does that sound okay? This is your show.
I'm not even going in the flavors, dude.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Mm.
I can word this as perfume.
Mm.
I can word this as perfume. Like, that's why I haven't had a sip yet. The nose on this whiskey is daring, is savory. It reminds me of a dessert. Like, it's rarely that you find that, because now I'm very curious of the age. If the type of ingredient, the quality of the ingredient is creating this type of nose, dude, it's like if cinnamon spice, clove, and cacao were just dusted in front of you, what do you get on your nose? That's what is the nose here. Holy crap. I love, like, it's rarely that I can nose a whiskey. Like, I can count how many whiskey I can honestly look at someone and say, dude, I don't need to drink it. I'll just sit here and just nose this whiskey. Wow. All right.
You're picking up on so many of the inspirations. I just want to keep you going.
Cheers.
I don't have anything.
I'm salivating, like I'm spitting. They're speaking because it's just so mesmerizing and attractive on the nose because of those beautiful. It's not just sweet. It's, you have that little bit of that spice, cinnamon kick ish coming through. It's that cloviness, but the cacao is all over here.
Yeah. I like to think of it as there's a little very dark fruit underneath it all.
Okay. I see what you did there, Phil. Okay. I'm not saying you reinvented the wheel, but you sure bringing a new shape to it. The reason why is I don't know what you think. If you rewatching this show, this is not a disapproval. This is as if you're tricking my brain. I don't know if it's bourbon or I don't know if it's scotch. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Right? If a lot of people, when they do American single malt, you predict things on it. It's over, the barley is overbearing with the grain of the barley, right? The charred oak takes over too much oak, so you get a little bit of that confusion. Some just copy, which I can appreciate, the Scottish way of doing it. So it's that lightness. Those, you said, screw it, and it should be, Brother Justus, screw it. We went the other way because in my head, I compare this with a steak, just like if a bourbon guy is coming. In my head, I can put it in chocolate ganache, just like you would do for a heavy weeded bourbon, right? In my head, I can have this in a highball, just like you do with a typical scotch.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm thinking of every other. I can make a Manhattan with this. as a bartender. I can do that. So the real question is, what the fuck is going on, Phil? Tell me what's happening.
Well, I mean, that is amazing to hear you say. You're reflecting back so much of what the intention has been with this. And it is to say, I'm not following those roads. It's actually a sign of I believe it, and you can judge it, and your viewers can judge it. To me, it is a sign of my respect for Scottish traditions and my respect for bourbon traditions, that I look at going onto the same court as them and try to play them at their own game. And I'm looking at certified guaranteed L. You know what I mean? I'm not going to out Scotch.
I have a friend in the UK that is like a buyer of spirits. I want to call her after this interview and say, I have a sample to send you. I bet you never taste anything like this in your long career of tasting things, right? You are giving me the same feeling I've had the first time I've tried Kavalan. I never thought that somebody can redefine whiskey in the way Kavalan redefined. I'm going to say it now. You are underrated, brother. You are underrated. You are. You don't need to try a whiskey multiple times to know exactly what it is. 117. This, either you're new into whiskey or you're a pro. If this whiskey is not in your winter collection, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. You gain a fan. If this was your introduction, if this is how I meet you, you gain a fan. I was very skeptical. I'll be honest. And for you guys watching, I was very skeptical. American Single Malt have not wowed me yet. And I understand today the TTB recognizing and whatnot, but no one has made American Single Malt that made me go, whoa, 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 whoa. The only people that were close to it was Virginia Distillery, but they also mimic my style of single malt, which is definitely the more Scottish style of single malt.
Yeah.
So no one has made an American whiskey single malt style and say, this is particular. No one has proven that to me yet till today. This is particular.
Thank you.
It must be something in the Minesota water. It must be. I don't know. It must be the nerd in you. It must be, because the passion translates in the spirit. Most people are full of shit. They will say a lot, but they will not deliver. I was very nervous. I will tell you, I was very, very nervous. And for all of you guys watching, if you're watching the recast, yes.
Thank you.
This is a yes for me.
Thank you.
It's a yes for me. So now tell me more about it, because now I want to know, how did you came to this, and especially being your first, right? Because I'm expecting you to have drawbacks, to look back 3 expressions later and say we were trying. No one comes out of the gate with something amazing, right?
Well,
their response always.
I appreciate it, and I'll tell you. So I'll use a quick analogy. My favorite ball player is Anthony Edwards, as you'd expect, right? And this guy comes off being one of the best, the hardest people in the paint, someone you never want to see drive into the basket. And then he realized, you know what I need to do? I need to work on my 3. And so he spends hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of shooting 3s, right? So now what are you going to do about Anthony Edwards? You can't do it. Pretty soon the league isn't going to be able to do anything about Anthony Edwards. So I look at somebody like that and I thought, I got to do the same thing. If I'm going to go into market with something, and I'm not going to just copy what's being done in Scotland or copy what's being done in Kentucky or copy what's somebody that's copying what's being in one of those places, I'm going to have to put in a lot of reps, because I'm going to mess it up a lot of times. But one thing I'm never going to do is I'm never going to make the consumer pay for my practice, ever. practices on my dime. I'm only going to put out there what I believe we've perfected. And so before I opened our distillery, I actually worked in a basement the size of this room, about 1,000 square feet. And we did 1,000 fermentations, 400 distillations, and 400 barrels, test barrels, to understand simple things. How do I ferment, get the best flavor out of these ingredients over and over again in something that charts a new path? Because I respect the consumer. I understand and I see how many choices are out there on the shelf. And I don't know how many people want to pay money for something that's just a copy of something that already exists.
Correct.
If I'm going to go out and try to get your attention or your listeners or your followers' attention, then I have to earn it. I have to earn it by doing something that was too hard for somebody else to try. And so they did it. And so we're the only ones that did it. So that's my backup statement on that. But what we've specifically done, and it's ironic that we're talking about this on the day that the TTB released this rule, because I fundamentally disagree with the rule. I think it's misguided. I think it's unnecessary. And I think it's going to stifle creativity in the single malt space in America. I think one of the reasons you haven't been impressed with American Single Malt is because of the mindset that led to this rule. And I know this isn't going to be popular. And I'm not trying to drag anybody down, because whoever is in this game, I respect, because it is a hard game to be into. And so however any other distiller tries to solve the million problems that are involved in trying to bring a successful product and brand to market, I'm never going to say it's wrong, because it's not. It's right for them. And I respect it. What I disagree with the rule, and what I think does make our whiskey special, is the 160 proof off the still cap.
Mm-hmm.
Because to get the most out of barley, what barley has, that 160 degree proof cap, in my opinion, has to do with the fact that American whiskey has worked with corn and rye, correct, which are relatively limited in their flavor profile and their texture profile. The enzymes, the complex carbohydrates, we can go nerdy all day. What barley brings to the table is an absolutely unlimited pantry of ingredients. And the higher the proof the cut does not mean the less flavor or the less character. The opposite. That you need lower proof cuts to get character in corn, because corn's relatively simple as a sugar, right? It's just as an ingredient. But for barley, the higher the proof you do, to a limit, right? We go about 165, 170. The more precise you can be in choosing exactly the flavors and the textures that you think are best going to complement the flavor of the barrel. So our flavor of whiskey doesn't taste over oaked, I don't think, because I spend 1,000 fermentations and hundreds of distillations, and now we're at almost 4,000 barrels doing one thing: fermenting a beer that will have the chemistry that I need to bring this barrel to life and create something new and rich between the two of them. So then I want and need that. My whiskeys aren't going to fit in this new American Single Malt definition. And I'm not going to change the way I make my whiskey.
But it's okay. It's okay. It's okay because somewhere, I don't believe, it's the old conversation had around, is single malt better than blended scotch, right? Single malt scotch better than blended. It's what people say. They're like, I don't drink anything unless it's single malt. And you have the other school who say, I grew up around blended scotch. Yep. And still after generation, I still can enjoy a different level of blended scotch.
Right.
So that's why I thought it was like, when something is new, everybody want to shape it the way they want to. But if your whiskey, or just like the history you told about Brother Justus, about how you came to this, right? To be authentic is to be different. Yeah. To be authentic is to be weird. So if you're not weird,
by definition, right?
Yeah, correct, right? You cannot claim to want to fit into a mold, right? Why is it people started finishing whiskey in bourbon in different casks? Bourbon was never finished till about 5 years ago, right?
Mhm.
So people wanted something different. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want you to derail from what you want to see on the market. I want you to keep your authenticity, because authenticity create literally that fandom for people to go, yeah, you
Mhm.
may like what you like. I like this.
Yeah.
And for me, when I had your whiskey, I'm like, fire, campfire,
Mhm.
conversations, friends,
Mhm.
family. Let's sit down. Let's have something interesting and come. So
Emotion.
for me, if that's, I know there's millions of other people that'll be like, yeah, that's how I feel about having this whiskey. So I think you and I, you don't need to fit in the mold. But so far, you still haven't answered me. I have this amazing whiskey. I want you to shock me with how it came about. So you 100% malted barley, new charred oak. How old is it?
Pardon me? How old is it?
Yeah,
The oldest barrel is 18 months. It's
bullshit.
less than 2 years.
See, that's why I can't trust nobody. You see, I have trust issues. This is why I have trust issues.
It's on the bottle.
This is why I have trust issues. Because the reason I have trust issues is there's no way a whiskey that is under 2 years old should taste this good. There's no way.
It's true, and that's a demerit, right? That's in a lot of people, they just assume age is better, and for a lot of the cases that's true, but it doesn't have to be. It's not the most important. It's an important factor. But when I think about, the quality of a whiskey, age is this. It's the neck. To me, it's
Remember what I said about Cavalan.
yeah,
Because when the first time I was told how old because of the weather, because of the area,
yeah,
how old those whiskey are. The first time, my favorite peated whiskey, I was told that they're only 5 years old, which is Octomore. I'm like, ain't no way
yeah.
something this young can be good. But I am an advocate of taste over age. I'm 100%
Always.
advocate. For me, is a sign of, I know I'm gonna ruffle some feathers. Is a sign of maturity. If you're mature in the whiskey industry, you know age is irrelevant. If you have reached that level of nirvana in
Mhm.
whiskey knowledge, you understand age is irrelevant. Now, using age to sell you expensive whiskey, yeah, Papa Bear is gonna come out to actually talk smack about that. But age is irrelevant. I
For me, I, to start from where to say what we do. To me, ingredients, fermentation, starting with barley versus. I mean, barley is a vast world. The oak barrel that we use is a vast world because of the terroir of Minnesota. You cannot make this whiskey with an oak tree that grew anywhere else but Minnesota. It's designed for that flavor, for that barrel, and fermentation in the cuts, right? So it's the quality. My basic founder, my basic idea when I went to this distillery and I learned how to make whiskey, and all the light bulbs went on in my story, was I kept hearing that, well, we do these cuts and we put it in the barrel because we have to do these cuts because they don't all taste very good right away, but over time they eventually taste good together and they mellow and they deepen. And my thought was just, well, why not just put good tasting quality whiskey in the barrel to begin with, and then it'll taste even better.
Correct.
And that's been, I know it's a beginner idea, it's a naive idea, but to me the logic is irrefutable. It just takes craft to get it right. And so these barrels, the other piece that you should know about this whiskey is they were aged in small format barrels, right? So the
Okay.
5-gallon barrel.
Okay.
But you can't just age whiskey in a 5-gallon barrel and have it taste good by aging it longer. You have to get, at least I can, maybe somebody else can, I can't. What we had to do was get the exact right distillate into that barrel, understanding, because we had done the repetitions of what that small format barrel was going to do to the make. And then when those two things come together, how they fit like a glove and a puzzle piece to snap into place a complete structure of body and depth, texture. I talked about that musical sort of notation of bass and treble notes, right? A good middle, a beat at the bottom, right? All of that has to come together and be precisely planned. And so we took 5 barrels of 5-gallon barrels and then secondary cast them in a used 30-gallon, all Minnesota grown white oak. So that's the specifics of how we do it. And we do a mix of hearts cuts. So it's about 60% of a good, clean malt heart cut, and then about 40% of redistilled heads and tails. Now, in barley-based distillation, heads and tails are hiding gold. They're hiding jewels. They're hiding the most beautiful flavors and textures you can imagine. And so we redistill those because, one, there's a little bit of ethyl alcohol still left over in them, but most importantly, that's where cherry and cocoa and cloves and nutmeg.
And obviously, going back to the Scottish/Irish traditional way of actually distilling, right? So you're not running away from tradition. You're keeping that tradition, even though you're bringing something
new. A new use.
Correct. You kind of, you were kind of cheating, Mother Nature a little bit, because by using those smaller barrels, obviously, aging is more rapid. And by blending that more together into one, then obviously you get that uniformity that goes
right.
Phil, I'm telling you, I'm here with you. I know where your mind is, right?
And you're going to know, and your followers are going to know, and distillers know that barrel maturing, 2 things are happening. You have your additive maturation and your subtractive maturation, right? And so we line up what you want to do, the kind of maturation you want to have happen. In my view, you have to prepare the fermentation and the distillate to match the main type of fermentation you want, or the maturation you want to have happen. In this case, I knew from the beginning, I want the maturation to be primarily additive. I don't want to keep it in the barrel long enough for the subtractive to come in, because I'm going to control the flavor and the textures and the structure of the whiskey going in. So what I really want is the additive layer of the barrel character coming in and adding in and blending in with the whiskey. And then to stop that, cut it off at about a year and a half, because I don't want any further additive, and I don't want to start digging into subtractive maturation. So it's just simply being intentional about the tools and the traditions. The reason we have the traditions is because they're the tools that work. But that doesn't mean you have to use the tool exactly the same way. If we're intentional with how we use the tool and the tradition because we have an end result in mind, that to me is the art. That to me is, I hope, a contribution. I'm not trying to drown anybody else's voice out at the table. I'm just trying to add something that hasn't been spoken before in a way that's going to be coherent to the people who might be listening.
Let's talk about when you actually really held on to a different level of tradition as well, by talking about your second SKU, which is the cold peated whiskey, which is interesting, because in my head I'm like, cold peated whiskey. That is again another nerdy, very scientific way to want to do something that have been done in the opposite way, right? When I hear peat, I'm hearing smoke, I'm hearing, I'm hearing a burning, I'm hearing drying, I'm hearing these things. So tell me a little bit about this cold peated whiskey. I poured a little bit of it here. It's 43% ABV, is 86 proof.
Yeah, it's meant to be an accessible, everyday type of sipper for people. We'll be bringing out higher proof cold peated, but this is a brand new whiskey. Nobody has ever made this whiskey before. We kind of made it up. And my starting point here, Jack, is Minnesota again. Minnesota has 7 million acres of peat. There's as much peat in Minnesota as Scotland and Ireland combined. And I thought, what can I do to add to the conversation? I don't want to copy Scotland and Ireland. What would be an American way of bringing peat to the table? And I thought of Tennessee whiskey and the Lincoln County process, right? Filtration. And I thought, well, what if we could use peat as a filtering agent, as a pressing and an infusing agent, as opposed to a smoking agent in the malting process? And so many experiments later, we found this, what it does to me is really gorgeous. So peat is one of the most extraordinary materials on earth. It's 8,000 years of every plant that has grown since the end of the Ice Age, all preserved in a mat. Every plant, it hasn't decomposed. We say rotting bog, but a bog is the only place where nothing rots. Everything is preserved. And I thought, what does that taste like? I want to know what 8,000 years of ecological history tastes like on my palate. How can I get that into the whiskey? So I thought cold peated because of cold pressed coffee, right? So we've just pushed the whiskey through the peat, and the peat has, again, just like the barrel, has both additive and subtractive maturation effects on the whiskey. It filters the whiskey, clarifies the sugars, makes them more candy-like as opposed to baked goods, and then it adds and infuses in an 8,000-year-old mushroomy earthiness.
You know, American people are gonna give us side eyes to this.
It's okay.
This is truly for the Scotch lover. If I, and this, you know me, I'm very transparent.
I love it.
I'm looking for my bottle of Lagavulin. I'm looking for my bottle of Lafroig, and I can't find it. And somebody goes, "Do you have something else?" Say, "There you go. Go." This would do it. Because for the people, and I have literally a group of peat heads. We call ourselves the peat heads because
peat heads.
If he doesn't have peat, we don't want it, right? Now imagine my problem with peat whiskey for the most, and you may have solved something. My problem with peat whiskey usually is that if you've had anything sweet or creamy, peat tastes almost disgusting.
Yeah. The phenols are too strong.
Correct. You may have solved that. Because the sweetness that comes from this barley, and maybe the fact that cold peat water to filter it's what you use versus actually smoking the phenol almost into the barley.
We're actually pushing the whiskey through solid peat. So in granular form. So yeah, we're
almost like how the Lincoln County process goes.
Bingo. And that's why we call it the Aiken County process, because I'm always give credit, right? I didn't invent the idea of filtering whiskey. I credit Tennessee and the Lincoln County process. I call it the Aiken County process because Aiken County is Minnesota. It's 1/3 peat bog, that county, and that's where our peat is from. So it's taking the process and then the material and putting them together.
This whiskey tastes like if a single malt was aged in a sherry barrel and then blended with an ex-bourbon barrel peated whiskey. What would that give you?
That's an awesome take.
That's the best way I could do. If somebody asks me what does it taste like, I say take your heavily peated ex-bourbon second or third fill peated whiskey and take a bourbon that a single malt that maybe spent 4 to 5 years in a sherry cask, blend them together at a 80-20, and you probably get this.
That's amazing. So this whiskey is water, barley, new white oak, and peat. That's it.
You should change your name. It's no longer Phil. You should call yourself the alchemist. because you are creating things and flavors that only can be thought of, not really imagined or have proven process, right? It's just, you know
Yeah, no
what, I
one's
think
no
I
one's done
can
it
change
before.
this into that. You are doing some alchemy here. And I
Thank you.
think I respect that, because whiskey, as big as it is, can be boring.
Mhm.
I promise you, the simplicity of your bottle probably will make somebody walk past it and look underrated. If I was a capitalistic jerk, I would have made a fancy ass bottle and pour your whiskey, and I'm taking it to all these places around the world, and people are gonna just guzzle it up as the best thing since Jesus Christ himself, right? And that's really that's really what it is. But it says everything about you. The simplicity of the way you present your whiskey. You is not pretentious in any way, shape, or form. Um, it has a cross, and the cross can relate to
Mhm.
multiple different religion. and and if you never just had it, yeah, now I want to try your silver whiskey, because due to the quality of the ingredient that I'm tasting right now in this 117, I want to try that new make.
I love
Because
it.
if this is only a 2-year-old whiskey, give me the new make. I might as well just drink that one.
That's why we do it. American consumers, we've been, and whiskey aficionados, we've been we've been incredibly treated by the bourbon traditions that we have. Like, we have incredible bourbons and ryes. Like, no shade, man. This is it. They're amazing. So I'm not going to try to go where they go. But what we haven't done, what we haven't understood or explored, is the bounty of barley.
Correct.
Barley can do things that nothing else can do. That's why it's the oldest beer grain. It is the oldest whiskey grain. Everything starts with barley. And so our new make shows that, just puts that naked in the bottle. It just says, hey, no barrel, nothing. You want it, this is just the purity of what malt and water can be. And treated, and other people can do other things with that. See, I'm not saying these are the end all be all of what can be done by any stretch, but here's an example of what can be done. If we
I
just go
think
to simplicity.
it's we don't need boring. We need new. We need different. We need something that intrigues the consumer. And I'm telling you now, when it comes to intriguing, Brother Justice just made in my top 10 list of intriguing whiskeys that I've ever had. And for me, this is the whiskey I'm taking with me when I'm going outside of America, when I'm meeting people that are used to that culture of single malt, and are just, very fascinated, but also talk a lot about American single malt. I was fortunate this year to be at the whiskey live in the UK, and you had whiskey lovers from Turkey, from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation that happened, or the ultimate consensus, is you have traditionalists and futuristics people when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
whiskey now.
Mm-hmm.
The traditionalists just want their sherry barrel, stay in that thing,
Right.
or the really peated whiskey, and that's it. They don't want anything out. They may be every now and then maybe try a Jack Daniel, or a Woodford
Right.
of the world, and they'll be fine. They'll be fine. But you have the futuristic people that are looking for new flavor, complexity. They're going towards those New Zealand, new
Yeah.
whiskey, those Australian whiskey,
Yeah.
those
Starward,
Taiwanese
for example,
whiskey,
right?
right?
What they're doing with wine
Japanese
barrels.
whiskey. But even those are the people now that are looking for over the traditional American whiskey, right? They're like, okay, what else America has to offer that are a
Yeah.
little bit different? So it's either the older version of our whiskey, the
Yeah.
dusties that we have, or things like this, that if I take this to a dinner in Budapest, if I take this a dinner in London, and I put it on a table, the label says a lot, but when we pour this whiskey, a conversation is about to start. Right? A conversation about to start. And you gain a fan in me. And if you guys are here, and you don't follow Alchemist Phil, I urge you. The website is down there. It's brotherjustice.com. Tell us a little bit about. I want to hear more about distribution. As far
Yeah.
as you're concerned now, where can people get this whiskey if people want to try now? I will tell you from my conversation. I don't need to tell y'all which one I believe should be your first purchase immediately that you should be looking for immediately.
Yeah, and the
And
founders one is almost gone. So if that's the one, you should go fast.
that's what I would tell you, because the second founders reserve is already in the works.
It is. It's already out there.
Pre-order it. You can pre-order it. And now I'm very curious because I tried it at 58 and I think it's phenomenal. This one is at 62.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it in a little bit as we talk about what's coming up. But let's talk about how can people try to have your whiskey or
well, right now we are just distributing in Minnesota and Illinois, Chicagoland. So if you're anywhere near a Binny's, walk in, you can find us, as well as at a lot of on-premise, but and off-premise. But the easiest thing to do is at that brotherjustus.com. We do have a whiskey finder where you can find where we're on the shelf retail or at your favorite bar or restaurant in Minnesota or in Chicagoland. But you can also order, right? So we do have an ability to ship to 40 of 50 states through our website. If you go onto the website through brotherjustus.com, you're going to be able to find it or how you can order. And as long as you're not,
it's literally brotherjustus.com shop. That's it.
Yeah, and that's it. And you'll be able to find what we have.
Literally where you go and you have the ability to actually buy it, because I'm checking it out right now. The website is slick. There's nothing crazy for you to actually bother with. You click on it, it gets you literally back on the website. It opens up where you need to be, and you can order it immediately. You can pay with your card, you can pay with Google Pay. It's ready to go.
That's it. And for now, that we'll be building out. I really believe, we're on the liquid side. We talked to the liquid side. The business side of whiskey is its own thing. But I really believe that good whiskey is like water in the desert. If you cast it widely, it's going to burn off, evaporate like it was never there. But if we can drip it in and develop a little bit of an ecosystem, right? Get some green things going and then expand that, get that depth and get some roots in terms of our fans and our followers. That's the way to build a sustainable long-term brand and business. So, we'll be adding some markets over the next couple of years, but we're not going to be doing a big widespread splash. It's going to be very intentional. Make sure that we're out there in the market to support it, because we know people have so many choices. You have so many choices out there, and avenues like yours, Jack, are just incredible. To like your whole intro today about meeting the people behind it. That some of our brands, like a lot of our brands, like they're real people here. We're out here grinding. We're doing our best to do the best craft that we can do. And so I want to make sure that I can bring that passion to every market that we grow to. And I can only do that if we do it one step at a time. So I'm really glad that we have the ability to do that shop ship and get it to people more widely that want to find us. And if you think we should come to your state, send us a message through email or through our website, and say, hey, come down here to Louisiana, come over here to Kentucky, come around here to New York, wherever you are. We'd love to hear if this is a whiskey that you like and you'd like to see on your shelf. Nebraska. I'll be down. I'm coming down to Nebraska, Jack.
Absolutely. Let's quickly tell the folks what is coming next, what they should be prepared for, because obviously they already know my impression for what I just tried. So what's in the future? What's 2025 is right literally around the corner.
2025 is going to be an exciting year. We've got our Founders Reserve. The Founders Reserve 2 is out. We just got that out there right now. So if these flavors, and I loved you picked up on all the flavors of Founders 1, those spice and those clove and those cocoa flavors, and then that Manhattan, that was my inspiration. I was trying to create a Manhattan in a glass. With Founders 2 at 124, I've reached for barrels, and this is how I put the Founders Reserve together. I go behind here in these barrels, and we get samples from 100, about 100 of our barrels, narrow those down to 50 and so on, until I find an idea that I can pursue, so that every Founders Reserve is different. The Founders Reserve 2 is orange marmalade, baking spice. It's an old fashioned. It's a 124 proof old fashioned with all the richness, all the sweetness, all the depth and complexity and spice of that. So that's coming out, and then we'll have Founders 3, which I'm working on the blends of that as we speak. So 2025 will be Founders 3. We're also going to be developing a couple of other interesting things, very small. We just do one thing at a time. I want everybody out there to know that if we've put something on the shelf, it's not chasing a fad. It's not trying to capture a moment. It's saying the whiskey told us this needed to be there. That's it. So I know that Founders 3 will be out there, but as far as what else is coming down the pike, that's going to be the whiskey telling me what you need to have, not the other way around.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. When a real whiskey nerd and lover decide to make a whiskey, he will not make a whiskey that will just answer one question, or he'll make a whiskey that inspired curiosity. And right now, I'm going back to nosing this Founders Reserve like multiple times after it was done, because truly you hit the nail on the head with the Founder Reserve mentality. I can't wait to see what 2 tastes like, because for me, I don't think seriously, and I just need, after this week, I'm gonna just package some stuff. I'm gonna send it to 2 people, and I say, and tell them, you tell me what you think this is, because and it's crazy, because this conversation all started for me seeing somebody post this as one of the best American Single Malt they've had, and I said, I never even heard of this brand, right? And they say, you should know this brand. You are you, and you should. And I said, well, let's have a conversation.
Appreciate it.
You know, and guess what? I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did. This is probably the most intentionally delicious, less than 3-year-old whiskey I've ever had. And like I say, you give me the same impression I've had the first time I've had Cavalon. That's what happened with this. Is I'm gonna, next time I'm doing any private tasting, your whiskey will be them segment.
That's amazing.
Thank
you, Jack. And you're just down the street, so you got to come up here.
I do need to pick my camera guy, and we need to come down and see exactly all the things that are happening at your distillery, all the things that are where the cookies are made. We need to really find that.
I got a quick question for you. How many peated whiskeys do you think you've ever had in your life?
I would say when I say brand, different type of brand, probably over 50.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you have the divisions within those brands.
Correct.
This is the first and only whiskey you've ever had that actually tastes like peat instead of peat smoke.
That's true. That's
the only
true.
And so for you to find that flavor and be able to relate to it as a peat head means a lot to me.
But you don't understand. Your whiskey is gonna be now the trickster of my peated whiskeys, because I'm gonna put 3 whiskeys in a bag. I'm gonna have everybody taste all 3. I say one of these whiskeys, these 3 are all peated, but one of them is American. I need you to find which one is American.
Will you let me know the result?
Yeah, and I bet you I can already know that 60 to 70% of all the people in that room are all going to fail. They're all going to fail, because If you didn't tell me, if I was not told, I knew it was different. But if I
Hmm.
was not told, I'd be like, oh, this is more like not fully mature peated whiskey yet. That's what I'm gonna say.
Hmm.
Definitely from Scotland. I would have went on and made a fool out of myself. And that's a sentiment to how well you've done. So I thank
Well,
you.
I thank you. And I know I'm not alone. The platform that your adventure, your adventurism, your determination to discover and to try is, I know it's a service to the people that follow you, and you've got a huge following. People love you. Especially shout out to everybody out there in Chicagoland. And that is such a service to them, but it's a service to people like me grinding it out. So I just want to extend to you my sincere thanks for making this time for Brother Justus, for me, and devoting your incredible and your prodigious palate and intellect to breaking all this down, because it's been awesome for me. I really
I
appreciate
need
it.
to I need to talk to a couple people. They need to come see you to
Okay.
get their that this whiskey in their side of town because yeah, this is slept on. This is different. This is as modern and avant-garde as the New Zealand, the Taiwan, the all those that are bringing something new to the market. This is new. So I thank you for being a dreamer, right? You are a
Thank
dreamer.
you.
You are curious. You're pushing boundaries. Um, I hope 2025 is the year more people you become a household name where more people say, "Did you hear about that weird whiskey? Yeah, the one with the cross on it." Like I don't even want them to say the name. Like, yeah, the whiskey, the one with the cross on it. You know the one. That's really it. That's what I want. I want this to be about. I am truly, truly happy for you. I'm happy
Thank
something
you.
like this on the market. I hope more people know about you. I'm going to tell everybody in Minnesota they need to stop by your shop and grab a bottle and make sure that they know that you exist. I can't wait for people to hear more and taste more what you're doing. I thank you for being here. And as
Thank
usual,
you.
this is your home now. If you ever have something to say and you want to come home, this is now your home. You're now part of my hood. And I
I
hope you come
appreciate
back in a year or two from now so we can learn more about what's happening at Brother Justice. For all of you
it. Thank
guys
you.
watching, make sure you photo. You have the website is Brother Justice. They are on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they're on all your social media. But more than anything, if you're in Chicago and in Minnesota, go to your store, ask for one, get one. I promise you, you are not gonna regret. It's probably the best $100 and a little bit more that you have spent ever. That I can guarantee you. And I don't guarantee stuff often. I can guarantee this to you. Till next time, I'm Jack Bigadoo. He is Phil Steger, and this was Brother Justice. Cheers, everyone.